the central bank will have to be tightening policy here in Taiwan during the course of 2026. That's likely to come through interest rate changes first. But if the central bank does have to start raising interest rates, then that has implications for the currency in keeping the currency in the band where it's been over the course of the last few years or so. There's one other thing I think is worth highlighting about Taiwan. So that's sort of on the market side. But my argument is essentially, or my thinking about the economy is there's these very big changes happening. It's very likely that it has market implications. The mechanism for that showing up in the market is inflation rising and the central bank needing to take action. Now, there's obviously perhaps other mechanisms. The other two sort of arguments around this are, one, that it just doesn't matter. You can have all of these huge changes in the economy, and there doesn't need to be any market implications of that. And that, I think, is an interesting point of view, and may be true. I find it unlikely, but I think, you can at least argue that. And I think it's stronger to argue that if inflation never changes, which might be possible. The second mechanism that might change things, if, for example, politicians in Taiwan start to focus more on the underpinnings of Taiwan's growth and basically start to say, because we know in elections in Taiwan every time that there's a lot of dissatisfaction about the level of wage growth, particularly from young people. Now, that dissatisfaction about wage growth is partly because the currency is so undervalued. And so just to finish with one final chart, this is looking at incomes per capita in US dollar terms versus PPP terms. Now, again, in PPP terms, Taiwan is a rich economy, very similar to the US. In US dollar terms, Taiwan is not a rich economy. So US dollar per capita GDP levels are only about 40% of those in the US. Now, perhaps one mechanism that things change in Taiwan from a market perspective is because politicians start to focus on this and say that Taiwanese people essentially aren't earning all the benefits of the exports and the current account surplus that Taiwan is producing. Those export earnings show up in domestic household incomes because the exchange rate appreciates, which gives household purchasing power greater than it would have been otherwise.